I don't need to remind you all of the gravity of this matter. A family has lost its father, parents have lost their son, colleagues have lost a friend, and a man has died during the course of his work. Doubtless you will have all heard about this. You may even have known the deceased and heard second-hand comments about that tragic day. But it is your job to put all those thoughts aside. Now, for you, the jury, our job here is to establish what happened and to understand the circumstances surrounding how John Burnett died. You must listen only to the facts, to the statements given by the witnesses and their answers to my questions. Then it's your job to decide what lay behind the tragic events of the 21st of May. You will then direct me if the names of any persons or organisations represented here should be passed to the relevant authorities for criminal investigation. Right, I call John Burnett. Could you tell the jury your name?
John Burnett, and I'm, or was, a maintenance electrician at the Woodbury plant. As I'm sure everybody now knows, it was the middle of May, 21st to be exact, and I'd been told to replace some wiring in control unit number 2. I had the job card and the permit to work signed by the new senior authorising engineer, Pete Sawyer, I think his name was. I'd done the job before, so I didn't have to look at the method statement that was attached to the permit. Not that there was much time to check everything, as the bosses were on me back to clear the backlog of work. I remember my mate Frank doing his usual, going on and on about the United game the night before. To be honest, I wasn't really listening as I opened the cabinet. I wanted to get the job done, so I was just nodding and grunting in the right places. As far as I can remember, I put my hand inside the cabinet to check the connection.
Mr. Burnett, just so that we understand, you had the right signed permit?
Yes.
And you say you've done this job many times before?
Yeah, hundreds of times over the years.
Do you check all paperwork every time you're required to?
Well, no. I didn't check the isolation of the wiring to the control unit before I opened the cabinet. The method statement probably said that I should, but Pete Sawyer wouldn't have signed the permit if he hadn't isolated it properly. I heard that some people had complained about the sequential numbering to the switches being confusing, but it didn't bother me.
I'd just come on shift and I was talking to John about United's big game the night before. John always liked me to talk about the matches, and on this occasion I was exhausted that morning because it was an away match and I hadn't got back till 2 o'clock. And I noticed as we were talking, John was getting on with his work. And I reckon he must have taken it seriously when Bob, our manager, had to go about the backlog of work at the team meeting. In fact, that's all Bob ever talks about. So I noticed that John had put up the barrier to the number 2 control unit and had opened the cabinet. And we hadn't even got round to talking about the job when I think he must have noticed a loose wire or something, and he reached into the cabinet.
Were you close to John Burnett?
Yeah.
So you'd say that you both used to watch out for each other?
Yeah, we started on the same day.
Mr. Ixer, what do you recall of the 21st of May and the events leading up to that day?
Well, I didn't see John on the morning of the accident. We have a jobs list that I try to prioritise, even though I know it just gets changed on the day, so that the team know what jobs they have to do each day. You see, I don't always see them before they start. Still, we don't get many complaints from the supervisors, just as long as I keep pushing my team to get through the jobs as quickly as possible. In fact, the need to push through their work was drummed into the team at our last team meeting. I have to say, I knew that something like this was going to happen one day. In my opinion, this wouldn't have happened if the numbering in the cabinet was more random. But what do I know? I'm not a safety manager.
I started working as one of 3 senior authorising engineers on May the 3rd. I was on permanent nights, and I just worked a night shift starting at 10 p.m. on the 20th of May. I was asked to do 4 hours overtime to cover an absent SAE after I'd finished at 6 a.m. on the 21st. The first job was to isolate number 2 control unit and to issue a work permit to John Burnett so that he could carry out some electrical maintenance. The shift supervisor gave me all the paperwork. I hadn't done electrical isolation for the company before or issued a work permit, but I read through the permit and the method statement and it all appeared fairly straightforward. The isolation switches are numbered sequentially. I was sure I'd got the right one. And according to the method statement, the electrician should have checked before he'd started the work.
I'm assuming that safety papers or permitry are familiar to you?
Well, like I said, I hadn't done one for the company before, but it was very similar to the ones I'd done in the past, over the past 2 years. Otherwise, I would have asked somebody.
Mr. Ahern, as the site manager, could you tell the court what actions you've taken to find out what happened on the 21st of May?
Well, I've spoken to Dave Key, Bob Ixer, and Pete Sawyer about their failures that led to the accident. I've also warned them of the possible consequences that may follow once these investigations are complete. I need to speak to Joe White soon to go over the appointment of Mr. Pete Sawyer, as I'm not convinced that we have the right man for that very important job. We have one of the highest safety records in the industry. We're always pushing forward the safety message. People come to us to learn about this. We can't afford to lose that reputation, especially when there's such tragic consequences. See, the fact of the matter is, I trust these people with the safe, day-to-day running of the factory. This allows me the time to do the planning and the reporting that HQ want to see.
How much were you involved with the day-to-day management of the safety on the site?
Well, the day-to-day management is down to the supervisors and the managers on site. I make sure that there are weekly team meetings on safety, as well as the yearly cycle of briefings, refreshers, competency tests. This reinforces to everyone that I have very high standards of safety.
I asked the senior authorising engineer to stay on for a bit of overtime because the day shift SAE was off sick, and we were desperate to try to resolve an ongoing reliability problem with number 2 control unit. Of course, I know the rules about overtime, but what with stock shortages and the refit in the production department, you know, we was pretty much at breaking point, and I didn't have another option. He seemed happy about the isolation and the permitting for the job, so I just let him get on with it. I mean, normally I would check, you know, everything was all right and talk him through the safety aspects before the work started, especially because he's new, but I really just didn't have the time.
Well, I didn't really know what was going on at the time leading up to the accident, to be honest. The procedures require that the isolation is double-checked, so really there shouldn't have been a problem. I was asked to interview Pete Sawyer because Lynn Garrett was called away urgently to attend a union meeting, as I recall. Pete, was ideal for the job. He was the perfect SAE, so to speak. He had the right qualifications and the right experience. We needed someone ASAP, and he was the man for the job. It was a perfect match. I actually employed him for the night shift, so the fact that he was on site in the morning, I don't know why. I would have to talk to Dave Key about that.
Mr. White, you're the production manager at the plant, so site safety is a major part of your job?
Yes, it is my job. No matter what the production demands are, I know that they grumble about me, but I still work very hard and long to keep driving forward the safety performance and to also improve our methods. I know that the guys don't always appreciate that, but it doesn't actually get done on its own.
Well, safety is our #1 priority, and we do have a good record, so this was a terrible incident for us. I wasn't at the site on the day of the incident. We've been having a few industrial relations problems at the moment, so I've had to get involved in some important union meetings. I understand that our new SAE, Pete Sawyer, was asked to work overtime and to isolate and permit some electrical work. Now, there are probably a couple of issues here. Everyone knows the rules about overtime involving anyone who does engineering and maintenance work. And I don't think that Pete Sawyer would have had our company training for isolation and permitting. Although our competency assurance does need improving. I need to have a chat with Pete Sawyer. I missed him at his interview because of another union meeting. But Joe White assured me he was the right man for the job.
And I don't understand why the parts numbering system is being suggested as the cause of the incident. When I joined the company 4 years ago, the machinery records were a mess. We did a number of things to tidy this up, including the introduction of a very simple parts numbering process. But this was extended to all fuses, switches, taps, and other process control parts. It's very simple and easy for everyone to understand.
How much time did you spend with the team at the plant before establishing the new parts system? And what's their feedback been?
Well, at the start, I spent a bit of time on the shop floor. I got the information I needed, sorted out the information, and set the system up.
Unfortunately, I've still not had the opportunity to meet Pete Sawyer. We have some new ideas about competency assurance that I need to impress upon him, but we haven't yet had the opportunity to speak, and maybe if we'd spoken a week earlier, we could have prevented the accident. The maintenance manager has previously spoken to me about well, a number of issues, potential confusion really around the many part numbers, and I think this has caused a near miss or two. That may have contributed to the incident. But, I mean, it's not that easy a thing to change. The divisional design engineer introduced the sequential numbering throughout the whole factory, so it's not that simple. Anyway, the new procedures I'm working on with the consultant, they will definitely solve the problem.
Mr. De Vere, what we've heard about is part numbered. Presumably there are wider safety issues that you address?
Very much so, yes. In fact, I do get to hear criticism about myself all the time because I'm constantly referring to statistics. I think it's a good way to measure the culture and to see how safety is being valued here.
I was taken on by Ben De Vere, the company's divisional safety manager, on a year's contract, basically to write procedures. I'm very highly qualified and I have a lot of experience in this field, and I feel that I give my clients very good value for their money. When we were putting the maintenance procedures together, Mr. De Vere and I discussed the risks related to wrong reading of sequentially numbered parts. We decided that the risks were negligible because the new procedures are so thorough that a misread couldn't possibly lead to an incident.
I saw Pete Sawyer in the control room about 20 minutes before the incident. I didn't speak to him because he seemed to be engrossed in some kind of paperwork, and I had already spoken to him about his plan for his permit training during the previous evening. However, I did wonder why he was still on site and why he was still working, because, well, there are company rules about extending an employee's shift that would have stopped that from happening. Of course, I now know that he was looking at the method statement for isolating some electrics and for issuing the permit for John Burnett. And I know that he wouldn't have had sufficient training to be authorised for that. I am working with Ben de Vere on a new competency assurance system that will ensure that this kind of thing will not happen again in the future. We had planned that it would have been implemented by now.
You didn't think to ask Mr. Sawyer why he was still on site?
Well, I probably should have done, but managing staff time is really down to local management, and I didn't want to cut across any other arrangements.